This is Project Phoenix Update by Boyle, introduced by Rosemary Bates, Executive Director of Economic Development.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to remind you that part of the MOU did require Boyle to meet with the public, and they had additional meetings with adjacent property owners and business owners, as well as a broader range of downtown property and business owners. And per the MOU, they are here tonight to give you an update from those meetings. There is no action you need to take tonight. This is just information. So it will be Mr. Haynes and Mr. Harlan, and please be gentle on Mr. Harlan. It's a tragic day for him. He turned 40. So.
Thank you for that, Rosemary. That's okay. No, we're glad to be here, and Council and Mayor Brown, thanks for having us. As Rosemary mentioned, over the last it's really been over the last 2 months from the restated and amended MOU that we were going to take steps to take our conceptual design that we'd worked on through the end of July and get public feedback related to the conceptual design. So where that started was on the 24th of September. We met with what we'd call our downtown stakeholder group, which was primarily local business owners here and adjacent property owners. We did that in a segment of just 2 meetings, 2 meetings in succession. Felt like we got some very solid feedback there. And I think as much of anything in those meetings was to be informative. There's been a lot of questions about Project Phoenix, about what it is, what it isn't. And I think just give some transparency to say, hey, here's what we've done to date. Here's what's stated in the memorandum of understanding that we've had signed with the city, and here's where we're trying to head, and would want to hear some of your pros, cons, and feedback and concerns. From there, we had a public meeting that was held on October 14th, the evening of October 14th. Unfortunately, we didn't have a very large turnout for that meeting. I think we had a decent number of viewings on YouTube for the live cast. And as part of that meeting, we were able to develop a tool that we'll share with you here, and was mentioned earlier through something called Mentimeter with one of our conceptual architect. What we did is we shared the conceptual design of the project, and then we're able to take this tool and try to gauge, primarily related to a handful of different things, what's the architectural sense or feedback from the attendees to date, what they want to see, what they don't want to see, look at massing. I think try to dispel some things that have maybe been put out there about what kind of massing, how big, tall, small we are looking to try to build. Again, give an overview of the program from a max unit count we're allowed to potentially do through the MOU to a minimum. And then also look at feedback from the attendees there to say, hey, here are some things we've heard that are concerns. Where do these rank related to where you see these as concerns? A lot of these, as we'll click through, are related to infrastructure items and just the general nature of what comes with construction of a project to this size and scale and how that may affect downtown. So I'm going to click through this and just share a little bit of the feedback. What we also did is after that meeting, we took this and sent this to the downtown stakeholders that we met with, and just allowed them to comment on this or fill out the survey for a couple of days, just so we could have a larger sample size than we had that were actually in the meeting that evening on October 14th. This is some public feedback, just comments and questions that, and just overview that I summarized earlier. So total for the responses on this, we've got 46 people, close to 50. When we start doing this generally is just to get a gauge of kind of who is filling this out. I think couple of key things to note is you've got a good bit of homeowners and business owners commenting and filling out this survey or giving some feedback. Most of the people that filled this out are, over 10-year plus residents of Gallatin, and most of them are in the downtown area daily, frequenting that through business or any other activity. This first slide, we just looked at what you guys have seen related to some precedent images and to say, okay, what are you really looking to see from the existing streetscape and architectural characteristics that you have existing in downtown Gallatin, and how important is that to you? I think we got pretty solid response that they want to have items that meet the traditional streetscape with Gallatin. We feel pretty confident in who we've hired to date to try to do Project Phoenix from an architectural standpoint, historical concepts, and what we've put out to date as we move forward and design, that we've got a good firm to try to execute something of that nature. These are just, again, precedent images to kind of give our consultants some feedback as we get further into design, to say, hey, these are items that we like, that we don't like. I think we would say we agree with a lot of the feedback that was captured in this from the sample size, and is positive from the nature that we didn't get any differentiating feedback related to the architectural comments, and to say, hey, we really need to pivot on what we're potentially trying to do or execute in our next phase of schematic design. We did ask, again, the massing question has been a big, big topic of conversation, and how tall or high or large something will be built or could be built on the site. And so I think an example of that was showing the new county courthouse, which is a beautiful building, but a very large building and a towering building. So just to get some feedback related to, what do you think about this from the details, materials of construction, and just the scale and massing of the building. You can see that kind of landed right in the middle, maybe toward the lower half on a scale of 1 to 5. It was, so on a scale from 1, hate it, to a scale to 5, love it. Architectural style, details, and materials, so that landed kind of right in the middle, about a 3. And then building height, scale, and massing was on the lower end of 2.1. So again, I think from the presentation of the building, right down the middle, from the size and scale, probably not as much. So just informed us further. This slide here, and it may be a little bit hard to read with the text, but this really hits on a lot of the general, I think, comments and questions that we had related to the project. And I'll read these out for you because I've got this printed out in front of me just for your options. So the first question was, we've heard some concerns about this project. What technical aspects are you most interested in understanding better? In our meetings with the downtown constituents, I think if anything, this was pretty consistent. And really our top 3 were, number 1 was traffic flow and congestion. Number 2 was construction impact. So how is this really going to impact me during construction? What's the timeline? What's the collateral damage of construction? If you guys have to do subterranean work, what does that look like? The parking supply and management is a big concern or question. I think most people know there's a lot of vendors here that have overflow parking that use this current lot today. You've got churches that use this lot on Sundays. So understanding during a construction time and period, how is that going to affect us? What options can be taken? So I think that's something for us to obviously consider from a timing perspective. And if we have to phase a project and you've got this block, under construction, how does that affect folks in this area and parking? Secondly, it says, what features would you like most to see in the new project? And, overwhelmingly, this kind of hits on that. They want to see extra parking. So as you can remember, we've got 2 garages programmed for this on Block A and Block B. One garage we're proposing to explore further as a subterranean garage, potentially under this block, that would have about 275 spaces. And then behind us on Franklin Street on Block B, that garage would, today in conceptual design is up to about 400 spaces. There was a lot of differentiating opinions on how much public garages actually get used. So I think that's something for us just to continue to explore, and with some of our consultants, and give confidence, I think, to your downtown constituency that those do get used, and how do you help activate those to get them used, and what can you do around them if they are going to be a public, access to the public and an amenity. We did not get overwhelming feedback to date related to we did get a couple of questions on the apartments related to unit sizes and things of that nature. We're not at that stage yet. That is really the next step we would take from a schematic design standpoint to start doing unit, make, square footages, things of that nature. There was probably more curiosity related to just what is that going to look like and the feasibility of the project, I think in general, from the public. We did ask, this was an open-ended question just of kind of neighborhoods or towns of comparable size and character that you visited that you felt like we could pull some things from, excuse me. You've got a couple of these that were highlighted and mentioned multiple times. So we've got, obviously Franklin is on here a couple of times, downtown Columbia. We've got Fairhope, Alabama, if anybody's familiar with that, Savannah. So a lot of the items that we've kind of highlighted or folks that mentioned were, feel pretty confident from, again, what we're trying to deliver from a product standpoint would be in line with what people would want to see or feel comfortable to see from a massing and scale on the presentation. Again, this was just a tool for that public meeting. This is not, I think we want to be clear, this is not the end of us having conversations or dialogue about how the design of the project would potentially work. The next steps for us, and this will really, on the heels of what you all have been talking about this evening with infrastructure, stormwater, things of that nature, we've got a handful of questions related to stormwater from adjacent property owners of how would this affect us and what impact does that have? Existing utilities, what does that look like? We have hired Reagan Smith on the civil engineering side, and so they did some preliminary due diligence in the first quarter of this year, back in February and March, with utility providers. And so I think our next step would be, planning and engineering is eager to reach out to us just to fully understand from here's what the program is, what those impacts would look like with us, with our civil engineer. We also would then be engaging our architect on schematic design, which would be about a 2-month process to really have more meat on the bone and take what we've gotten from an architectural perspective and really start tightening this program as we move toward really the end of the first quarter, when we would have to have development plans together to present. I'll be quiet at this moment, and if you guys have particular questions or response or feedback, to where we are today, just as a reminder, we needed to have, once that was done at the end of August, we really had about 2 months to try to get some meetings set in what ways we could, and then this being the last, work session we have before November 11th, we're doing those here in really somewhat short order. But again, that doesn't mean we would not do further or have further conversations with folks that couldn't attend, and had a handful of people that have reached out individually. So.
Don't have any questions, or, just proceed on?
What are you doing November 11th?
So, but what we needed to do was to have these meetings. It was probably more of an accountability.
You're not meeting with us on November.
I'm not meeting. No, the November 11th was a deadline to have public meetings, so to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. You said you had only 18 people do the survey?
We had 18 people live do the survey. And then what we did is we took this and we were able to, and this is something we can explore further, we took the link for that. And so for the folks that we had met with previously, when this was not done, it was not complete, we sent that back out to those individuals that we had met with in the prior meeting. So I think total we had 48 to 50 people do the survey.
50 people on a 50,000 population, that doesn't look...
Downtown stakeholders. Downtown stakeholders. Wasn't sent to the general population, it was sent to the downtown stakeholders.
We all stakeholders, because we're all going to pay into it. So it's not just the people around the square. It's all the constituents. So is there a way to get that link survey on the city website and add something in the bills? Because I know it's done regularly to add a newsletter in a GPU bill or something, a utility bill, to ask people to do the survey, so we have a bigger sample than just 50 people.
I'd say we're dictated by whatever the MOU says. I mean, or
Yeah, and
y'all
I think that's certainly something we're open to discuss and explore. I think at the time, all we knew, what we could do is said, hey, we can do this and get it back to folks we met with. But I think if we've got kind of a live, you have to put I know there's got to be a time constraint on how that's, I think, done or when you pull it. And it just builds continuously on what's been done to the previous. And I don't think you can make any edits to it. But I think that's something we're open to potentially exploring and doing. I think just for the purposes of us, again, trying to move fairly quickly, that's where we stood today. But we think it's a good tool, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea.
questions for them? And you want anything else you need to proceed on with, or?
I think at this time, I think just drilling in again on next steps, the infrastructure piece was a big, point of, I think, feedback for us and just general concern to say, hey, the project at this scale, how does that really affect us on a physical standpoint? And that's really what we saw. Jeff, feel free to chime in here. That's probably where we had most of our, I think, questions and concern. And some of these things you can't answer down the road, but there's certainly things we can explore, immediately from I'd say kind of civil perspective that could just give some more clarity on what would be affected or would not be affected related to necessary improvements for a development like this.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you.